Hi, good evening everybody, and welcome to the daily Rambam Shiur lesson number 90 and 91, Hilchos Issurei from chapter 9 until 14. Once upon a time, in the city of Prague, they had a very famous, one of the greatest sages of all time. He is known for his books he wrote, the Nida. Once upon a time, he was invited to the community council meetings. And part of the protocol in every meeting, anyone who has a proposal, a suggestion, he was welcome to present it in front of the committee members. So he says, I would love you to add the following into the bylaws of the community. Every community have their own bylaws, their own rulings. He says, yeah, what type of ruling? He says, there's only 3 rulings I would love to add to the community bylaws. The ruling not to steal, the ruling not to murder, and the ruling of not engage in promiscuous relationship. Everybody looked at him, you're a rabbi, don't you know it's already written in the 10 Commandments? Why are you adding it to the community bylaws? He says, well, I have noticed that people are very careful to preserve, to follow anything that is written in a bylaw. Something that is written in the Torah, they're not as careful, but when it comes to a bylaw, to a custom, to a derabanan, everybody gets excited about it. So in fact, we see something very interesting, that not only when it comes in the Jewish world, but also in the world in general. We see many times, we hear in the news, numbers, there is a war breaking out, and there are a bomb, there is natural disasters, and thousands, millions of people being affected. And yet it doesn't touch our heart as much as when we see a personal story of one of the victims, where the camera zooms in upon him, upon the family, upon how his life have changed overnight, the struggles, the suffering he goes through. That touches our heart and changes our attitude entirely. Because we are built in such a way that when we hear a piece of information, only when it comes down to the lowest resolutions, to a clarity that we feel a personal attachment, only then we are being affected by it. And that's the reason why our sage is teaching us the following words. Shma beni musar avicha ve'al titosh torat imecha. Listen, my son, the musar, the ethics, the rebuke of your father, and don't desert the teaching of your mother. And our sages are linking this passage, Musar Avicha, this is Torah Shebiktav, this is the Bible, the written Torah, and Torat Imecha, Zuhi Torah Sheba'al Peh. Same way that the contribution of the father to the fetus is a general contribution, where only thanks to the pregnancy, so then the detailed development of his organism is being done thanks to his mother. So the same way, in order for us to be able to follow properly the instruction of the Torah, where in the written Torah they appear in a general term, and they come into a very clear resolutions and instructions and details in the Torah Sheba'al Peh. So therefore, we see something very interesting. Right now, we are starting this Shabbat a new Chumash, the Chumash Dvarim. Though officially it is part of the Chamisha Chumshei Torah, and it is considered to be the Torah Shebiktav, yet within the Torah Shebiktav it has a different definition than the other 4 books. While the 4 books are speaking in a third party that shares an event that takes between one party and to another, throughout the entire Torah there is a third party shares, reports, Vaidaber Hashem el Moshe lemor. One entity speaks to another. In Chumash Dvarim, it is a personal dissemination of information where Moshe shares with the nation much more on a personal level, which is a similar concept of the Torah Shebal Peh in the Torah Shebiktav. The ability to bring down into such detail and such personal attachment of emotions, involvement on a very personal level, that's what Chumash Dvarim in comparison to other Chumashim is. And for that reason, happens to be that today's majority of the first shiur, the lesson number 91, deals a lot with what we called Divrei Sofrim, rabbinical rulings that were introduced in the context of the prohibition of Nida and Ziva. As we say before, that it says about Divrei Sofrim, rabbinical rulings, Chavivin alai, they are much more pleasant to me, the words of Sofrim, more than Divrei Torah. Further than this, we know that Divrei Sofrim, Rechim Chizuk, words that were introduced by the sages, rabbinical institution, they gotta have more strengthening than Divrei Torah. There is a beautiful piece of Talmud in Maseches Makos where Rava, one of the greatest sages of all time, he said the following words. He says how foolish the people of the world that they are standing before a Sefer Torah and they not standing before the great sages. What's so great about the sages? They have found in the open text in the Torah, it says when a criminal commits a crime, you gotta whip him 40 times. And yet, they managed to extract from the text of the Torah that only 39 times will be sufficient. So how merciful, how sensitive, how great they are that via their interpretation and method of extracting the rulings from the Torah Shebiktav, they deserve so much respect, and he compares the respect they deserve to the respect that we do pay to a standing Sefer Torah. So on the same note, today the first chapter deals with the subject that is called Ktamim, stains. Biblically, the only way that a lady becomes a Nida is only when or she feels that blood was actually extracted from her uterus, or even if she didn't felt, she actually took a cloth and checked. And why she actually checked, she managed to spot blood. This is when biblically she will be considered Tme'ah, and the prohibition are applicable to this state. Our sages introduced, they widened into what we called Ktamim. The word Ktamim means stains. Even if a lady doesn't feel anything, even if a lady didn't actually went ahead and checked over there. She just found a spot of blood on her garments, so she will become tamei. Nevertheless, there are many qualification and requirement that must be met in order for her to be in a state of nida. Requirement number one is the size. The size needs to be kegriz, which is about a size of a dime. Anything less than this, it's not tamei. The background that must be seen the spot must be a background of white. If it appears on a colorful garment, she is not tamei. Further than this, if the drop appeared on a utensil or a vessel or a surface that is not mekabel tuma, that is not receiving tuma. For example, whether she found it on the ground, whether she found it on a utensil that is made out of clay on the back of the utensil, clay cheres migabo, not from the inside, because the inside mekabel tuma, but a clay vessel or utensil migabor from the back is not mekabel tuma. Clay glalim and clay adama, something that was made out of waste, or something that is made out of mud. This type of utensils are not susceptible, that was the word I was using, not susceptible to receive tuma, so therefore she is not going to be tamei. Further than this, what we see consistently in any introduction of rabbinical rulings, the principle of heim amru veheim amru, when they have introduced a certain restriction, they have introduced as well all the situation that exceptional treatment will be applied in those conditions. So for example, one of the exception that will apply at the moment that she found blood on her garment, but she is able to link it to a external occurrence that took place. For example, if she is accustomed to visit a marketplace where they are slaughtering over their animals, and later she found over their blood. If the garment was not checked before and she found the blood on the garment, she may link it not necessarily for her own dripping, flowing of blood, but to the marketplace where she came from. So the idea is, given the idea of stains is a rabbinical introduction, they have introduced as well all the situation that acceptable or exception treatment will be considered. In the second chapter of today's lesson, lesson number 90, the Rambam deals in a situation where a lady have not concluded her pregnancy and she had a miscarriage. We know, we have learned before, that when a lady actually giving birth, so even biblically, if it's a male, she will be tamei, contaminated for 7 days. If it's a female, it will be for 14 days, biblically. But if the term of pregnancy was terminated, so what will be her status? So here a major distinction is being made, whether how many days into her pregnancy the miscarriage took place. So before 40 days, obviously it's not being treated as a fetus. From that perspective, it's being treated as water, and therefore she will not gonna have any effect about her status if it was before 40 days. If it is after 40 days, So obviously, if I'm able to determine the gender of the child, so it's clearly that it will be treated as the gender of the child. At the moment that I'm not able to treat the gender of the child, then I will apply all the severities of both of as she was giving a child a birth to a male boy, and the same severities as to a female, and the same severities as to a nido. The bottom line will be in the sense that though that there is immediate state of tum'ah biblically after the giving birth to a male or to a female, but yet there is also the perks that from the 7th till the 33rd by a male, and from the 15th till the 81 day by a girl, there is what we call the Yemei Toihar, the days that the blood is not really contaminating. In such a case that she doesn't know the gender, all of those days she is not going to have the privilege of these days, and therefore she will be, in case she sees blood, treated as a Nida. A Nida or Azava depends in what days she has, yet she will still, regardless, have to take upon herself, even if she doesn't see any blood, the first 7 and 14 days, be treated in a Tamei state regardless. In the third chapter of today, of Shiur 90, the Rambam deals with a turning point since the time we don't have the Supreme Court, the Beis Din Hagodol, to determine the state of the lady on one hand, and on the other hand the confusion and inability for us to be able to make a distinction between Yemei Nido, Yemei Zoivo, Yemei Taharo, and so on and so forth. So for that reason we are applying for every lady who sees blood both of severities. On one hand, she will be treated like a Zovo in the sense that she will need to count 7 clean days after the blood stopped to flow, and only at the end of 7 days, contrary to a Zovo that she would typically going to go to the mikveh on the 7th day in the morning, over here I will apply the severity of Nido, that she will go to the mikveh only at the eve of the 8 days. So today, this is the application of both severities. The severity of the need to count 7 clean days after the blood stops, and also the entry to the mikveh only in the conclusion of the 7 clean days. There is also another severity in the sense that every girl, from the moment that she is about ready to get married, regardless what is her situation, I am suspecting that possible out of excitement she may have experienced a menstruation, and for that reason, from the moment she is intending to go and get married, 7 clean days must she count, and only then go ahead and get married. There is another severity that they have applied in the turning point since the abolishment of the Supreme Court, that while before the blood of virginity used to be treated as a womb and therefore was depending what was the age and what was the biological state of the girl before she got married. So for example, we have learned that for a girl, a minor, so I'm giving all the time until it heals to have as much as he would like to have intimate relation in the olden times. And for a Nairo, if someone the age of above 12 till 12 and a half, I'm going to give her 4 days. Today, no matter at what age the girl is, the blood, the only permission he has is only the first be'ilo, the first intimate relations he have, and then he got to wait until she's clean, and only then continue their intimate life together. So this is a third turning point that took place after the destruction of the temple. That's the summary of lesson number 90, which is the lesson of Friday. From now on, we're going to start a summary of lesson 91, which is the lesson of Saturday. So, part of the prohibition of Issurei is people who are not allowed to get married with, is someone who is not Jewish. It says in the Torah, Lo tischaten bom. So biblically, it is forbidden in a marriage way, not to get married with them. However, rabbinically, the restriction is not only for not to get married, but also in an affair. One night stand is also prohibited rabbinically. Now, if it was done in publicly, so we have learned in the Torah last 2 weeks ago about Pinchas. Pinchas, what he was doing, he was zealous towards the honor of God. So it is a very unique situation. Had he went to Bet Din, to the court, and asked permission whether he's allowed to do it or not, they would not give him the go-ahead to do it. Further than this, even while he is zealous and he has the permission, not from Bet Din, to go ahead and stab, it was permitted only while the act is going on. He is not allowed to do it after the act. Further than this, even while the act is going on, had Zimri stood up and would stab back Pinchas, Zimri would not be liable, because as self-defense, he has the right to view Pinchas as a oidef, and therefore he would have the full right to go ahead and kill them. Nevertheless, the point that the Rambam bringing this concept is in order to illustrate how severe this prohibition is, to such an extent that the children, though biologically they are his, but nevertheless halachically they have no linkage to him. That's the one point that the Rambam brings in the first chapter. Further than this, even after a conversion that a non-Jew converts, so there is some nations that even after the conversion, they are still prohibited to get married to them. Some for a few generations, and some permanent. And we're going to go one by one. Chazal are teaching us something very interestingly, that a person who causes to another person to sin is much more harmful to him than someone who is about to kill him. And how do we know it? We see it two nations. Throughout the history was the nation of the Egyptians, that they have attempted and succeeded to kill us. They've killed us by drowning the children who were born, and they have killed us by slaughtering some of the children in order to use their blood for the bath of Paro, according to the suggestions of his doctors. They have tortured us, made us suffer for over 210 years. Yet, if someone of the Egyptians expresses a will to join the Jewish people and he converts, so the restriction for him to get married with a Jewish girl or have her marry with a Jewish boy is applicable only to 2 generations only. After 3 generations, no problem, they can get. Yet the nation of Moav and nation of Ammon, since their intention was not to kill us, but their intention to make us sin, and they have succeeded, they have put a stumbling block by sending their ladies in order to allure, in order to provoke the sins of incest amongst Jewish people. So since they were causing us to sin, so the punishment towards them when they want to join the Jewish people, so male won't never be able to get married with a Jewish people, male. Female, however, they are allowed to marry immediately. In fact, there is also a reasoning why. There is a reason in the Torah. Typically, Torah very seldom, very rarely provides reasoning to any form of a mitzvah, of a commandment. But there is a few exceptions. There is one exception. The Torah tells us that lo yovi moavi bikal Hashem. A person, a Moavites who come to join the Jewish people, it is forbidden to him to get married within the nation. And the Torah gives not one reason, the Torah gives 2 reasons. Reason number 1, advar asher lo yikidmu eschem balechem ubamayim b'tzeischem mimitzrayim, because they have not treated you with water and bread when you left Egypt. And a second reason, v'asher socha olecho, they hired Bil'om, the professional shaman, in order to give and curse you. So the obvious question, how come Torah gives reasoning, and not one reason, but 2 reasons? So I heard once upon a time a beautiful vote that explains the following way. When a person is not treating you, not necessarily it comes from bad intention, because who says he has money to buy water and bread for you? He may be poor. So therefore the Torah tells you, well, when it came to hire and pay top dollars for the invoices of Bil'om ben Be'or, they had a endless budget. Yet they didn't had a few pennies to buy bread and water to treat the Eden. So for that reason, it's indicative that their intention were very, very evil. So the question is, if this is the case, how come they're female? If someone is a female Moabite, she is permitted immediately to join in the nation without any problem. So the answer is given in that text as well. The Torah tells us that they did not came out and greeted you with water and bread when you came to their land. who is dalkoi, who is the custom to go out from his house and greet people, males, because the honor of a female, kol kvudo bas melech pnimo. The Gemara learns it. We learned already in the Torah about Saul, when the Malachim came and visit Avraham Avinu, and they asked him, "Aye so ishtecho, where is your wife?" She says, "Hinei ba'oihel, she is in the tent." Melamed, in order to teach us, so she was humble, she was modest, and kol kvudo, her entire honor, her entire respect, bas melech pnimo, that she is inside the house. So the Gemara learns from it. So you cannot go and blame the females that they were not kidmu eschem balechem u'amayim. You can go and blame the men, and you cannot have an excuse that the reason that they were not greeting you because they were lacking any funds, because when it came to pay top dollars for Bilom ben Be'oil, they had endless amount of money. So that's part of the Issurei Biah, Issurei Chitun, that even after they coming into the nation as well. There is also another segment of society that there is a prohibition to marry them, although they are Jewish, and that's called the Givonim. When we read in Tanakh, when Yeshua came to the land of Canaan, which later became the land of Israel, so was one nation who pretended as they come from a very far place and made an alliance, and later turned out that this nation is essentially part of the nation of Canaan. So they tricked the Jewish people, and though they justly had the full right to go and punish them, nevertheless they avoided to do it because of Chilul Hashem. Later on, Yeshua appointed them to be involved as servant to the work of the temple, and he restricted to marry them only while there is a temple that they serve. Later on, David HaMelech extended the prohibition on a permanent basis, since he have noticed a attribute of cruelty into them. There is a famous story where Shaul HaMelech killed the priest in the city of Givoin, and they, as a result of it, they have lost also their livelihood, and they were very upset. And David HaMelech asked them for some form of reconciliation, and they demanded that the only way that they will forgive and they will reconcile back the relationship if the children and the descendants of Shaul will be hanged. And there is an entire story, and they were hanged, but nevertheless, since he have noticed a attribute of cruelty in them, and we know that part of the simonim of the signs of the Jewish people, if they have the baishanut, shame, rachmanut, kindness, and gmilut chasadim, and generous act. Since he have noticed that they have cruelty in them, so he made a decree that they cannot go and marry within the Jewish people. In the second chapter of lesson number 91, the discussion is about the process that anyone who is about to join in the Jewish faith, what type of steps needs to go in order to complete the process of Geirut. So the model, the prototype of Geirut starts with the Jewish people. When the Jewish people before they received the Torah and they formed into a nation. So they went through the three primary items that any girl goes through. First of all, they had the circumcision in Egypt when they were consuming from the Korban Pesach. The entire story, how Moshe Rabbeinu, it's a famous Maimer Chazal. The second stage is Tvila. They were dipping themselves into the water before the receiving of the Torah. They accepted upon themselves the yoke of mitzvot by saying Naaseh v'nishma, and they actually brought korbanot, they brought offerings. Today, since we don't have a Bet HaMikdash, so even by the milah, circumcision, and tvilah, and dipping, and the Kabbalat mitzvot, that's those three stages that necessary for a person to complete the process of joining to the Jewish nation. However, it is very important that his motivation is pure, that there is no ulterior motive involved. For that reason, when the Jews historically had their own sovereignty and they were in a very comfortable state of economically, militarily, they were hesitant to accept any foreign people who expressed a will to join the Jewish people, because the obvious suspicion was that obviously they're not doing it for the right reason. They may have ulterior. However, though that was the general practice, we read in the Tanakh about great people like Shimshon Hagiboyo, Shimshon the strong, Shlomo HaMelech. They married girls who were not from the Jewish nation. We see that Shimshon was married to Delilah, and Shlomo HaMelech was married to Basparoi. And obviously you cannot tell about such tzaddikim that they were marrying, violating an outright prohibition, what that is prohibited in the Torah. So the Rambam writes like this: though that the official practice in those days was not to accept Geirim, yet those who came and joined and done it privately, not through the official Beis Din, but privately by their own Beis Din, the Jewish people were not rejecting them, but not embracing them. They were on a standby position to see how things will develop. Some of them have developed positively and some of them have not, because we see that some of these ladies that I've mentioned before, they have promoted foreign cultures within the Jewish people, which not necessarily ended with the upgrade of their spiritual state of the Jewish people in those times. In the final chapter of lesson 91, we're going through all the stages that accompanying a person who is expressing his will to join the Jewish people. So obviously the first response is informing what will be a motivation for a person in his right mind in the times of exile, where we are oppressed, where the state and anti-Semitism is so great. What will attract a person to join him? If a person is still strong and confident that he wants to join in, so obviously they're informing about the special merit that there is in the Jewish tradition, in the Torah, in the Olam Habo, and all other principles of Judaism are being informed, where the final stage is the stage while he is at the water in the mikvah, and a group of three dayanim are informing the light and the severe mitzvahs, where the final tvila completes the process of geus. Obviously, it must be done after the milo, after the circumcision, and kabbalas mitzvahs, the acceptance of mitzvahs. Towards the end of this chapter, he deals with a very interesting technical point. The ruling is that a Gael Shenis Gael, someone who joins the Jewish nation, halachically, ketinek shenoilad, like a child that is born, a new entity comes into him. So therefore, halachically, there is no prohibition on the principal basis for him to marry any previous relative of his. However, given the fact, and this is a rabbinical introduction, that people will not say that he came from a more severe state into a lighter state, because before the conversion he was still prohibited to marry his own relative, immediate relatives, and now just because of the conversion he will be permitted. So in order to avoid such a argument, so therefore there is still application of some restriction to marry some his previous relatives. There is towards the end also a very interesting attention is being paid to a concept of a slave. A slave, it's called the Eved Knani. A Eved Knani is a halachic definition, it's a halachic entity of a person that though he is not considered to be a goy, yet he is not a full Jew, in the sense that a male Eved, he is exempt from many positive mitzvot that they are time bound, like a lady, yet he is committed to most of the lotase. However, when it comes to the so-called intimate relationships, so there is a very interesting halacha. Given the fact that they don't have lineage, so for example, a person will be allowed to give to his female servant to male servant, something that is prohibited in any type of a relationship. But given that avodim and shfochos, they are considered to be like a property, am hadoim elechamoil. So all the restriction that typically will be applicable to other type or definitions of people, not going to be applicable to avodim, to servant, both male servant and female servant. For that reason, there is a famous expression that there is avdo behefkeo necholei, a eved in a state of a hefker. Hefker is a boundaryless type of a hefker, is a night in the context of property ownership, something that doesn't have ownership considered to be hefker. When a person takes an item that belongs to him and he gives away and he gives up his ownership, so the object turns to be hefker. So Eved, though on one hand he is entirely subject to his master, yet for that reason itself he doesn't have any ethical, moral boundaries that will restrict him like others, especially in the sense of when it comes to inyone bio and stuff like this. So thank you very much. I hope I've summarized exactly. So it's the shiur of Friday and Saturday. Yeah, thank you.